Hello, PubSoc Nation! I'm Christina Raposo, and today I'm going to be talking about the dangers of the fashion industry. So, fashion and the effects that it has on our globe is not a super talked about subject, but with the increase in discussion on climate change, different aspects of what go into that are being more and more discussed, like something like the fashion industry. So I personally believe that this is a huge topic that we need to be talking about right now because of its impact. Every person plays into the fashion industry. It's not just driving cars, taking planes, that carbon emission, but it's the day-to-day things where you are buying product and feeding into the fast fashion industry. So I go and I buy something and I am then buying into the fashion industry, giving them that forward mobility that they need, and I'm not the only person that does that. Everyone does it. Everyone buys clothes. It's a necessity within the United States society. It's practically a thing that's across the board for everyone that you wear clothes every day. There are some subcultures, but for the majority of people, practically every person plays into the fashion industry. I chose video format because YouTube and things like that do cater towards a younger audience, the teens and the young adults who are higher offenders of this issue within the fashion industry. Whether it's they're buying clothes or they're promoting the sale of clothes, or the idea that trends change by watching videos like these where they're rating fashion or they're guessing the prices and that kind of thing. In all of these kinds of videos, they're not looking at any sustainable brands, promoting those brands, putting them out there, just helping with that cycle of fast fashion. So I've said this term fast fashion a lot, and what that means is inexpensive clothing produced rapidly by mass market retailers in response to the latest trends. And to break that down further, because that's a little confusing, so it's really cheap clothes at brands like these. Their clothing is getting produced rapidly, quickly, getting put out, not really caring about the quality of things. They respond directly to what's the next thing that's happening. Just get the clothes out, get them to the customer, and if it doesn't sell, send it back to the factory, and who knows what's done with it.
Hey, editing Christina popping in here. I didn't explain what was coming next at all, so I'm going to now explain with the video how trends change and how it's so rapid. Because not the everyday person doesn't really see that unless you're like fully immersed in the fashion industry. You don't totally know just how quickly things change.
So it's not super standard about how people think about trends. Some people just think of it in terms of summer, spring, winter, fall, in those just 4 seasons of style. There are the big events like New York Fashion Week, Paris Fashion Week, Milan Fashion Week, where those set the trends for what's going to come, but more in a high fashion way. A lot of times that doesn't always carry over to the average person, but I wanted to focus specifically on the Gap. I feel like I am fit to talk about this because I have worked at the Gap for 3 years, so I know the way that their system works, how new styles come in, how often they come in. So Gap gets shipment roughly twice a week, so it depends on store, depends on need, depends on what the company decides to send them, because stores don't really get that much of a choice into it. They're just like, here's what you're sent, this is what you have to put out in your store. So my Gap got shipments twice a week. So it was Tuesday or Wednesday. Those were generally smaller shipments, and then bigger bulk, like new item shipments, not just replenishment, would be on Fridays or Saturdays. There is a very easy way to tell with Gap products when they were made. So for Gap, on the inside, they have this tag. So here you can see that this is summer of 2019. But with that, just because they'll say that they're from the spring or they're from the summer doesn't necessarily tell you what season they're for. So it's the constant new product coming into the store. And not only is it just like spring or summer, we have spring, 4th of July, Easter collections, holiday collections, different things that help you transition into new seasons as well. We're seeing these new cycles of fashion no longer because of those big fashion weeks, no longer because of what the designers are setting the trends as, but rather they're coming from things like online social media. There are influencers rather than just celebrities who dedicate their entire lives to what's in fashion now. They're constantly buying new items of clothing to show off to their followers, and then their followers then want to go in. And because of this, you see their increasingly damaging effect on the environment. Some of the biggest pieces of information that I was able to find was from CBS and World Bank. So what CBS found was global climate impact, 8% of that for the entire world came from the apparel and footwear industry. And World Bank, with a very similar but still slightly different piece of information, was 10% of carbon emission also came from that same industry. So part of that statistic, though they seem like relatively low numbers, things that you think of as higher risk, like international flight travel or marine shipping, that kind of thing, all of those combine are less than the percents that World Bank and CBS are showing. So less than 8% or less than 10% of carbon emission is coming from airplane travel and marine shipping. The true cost found that 80 billion new pieces of clothing are purchased every year by our globe. And again, if you break that number down, like that 8 or 10%, 80 billion divided by 7 to 7.5 billion people that we have on this earth is 10 new articles of clothing, but that's per person every year. And if you look at years prior, just 20 years ago, back to like the year 2000, that's 400% more than we had consumed just 20 years ago. And it's not only that all of this new fashion is being consumed and brought into our lives, it's how quickly their turnover is. People aren't keeping articles of clothing from 20 years ago. People don't keep the old fashion around with them because it's not in style anymore. No one's wearing that. They're throwing it out. It was found that about every year, every American citizen would throw away 82 pounds of clothing. People used to hold on to clothes for a lot longer than they do now because styles weren't changing as rapidly as they are now. And it's not just the effect that these whole pieces of clothing are, but it's the factories, it's their emission themselves, not only with carbon and putting that into the world, but with photos like this. This is a photo of a man working, and around him is all of this polluted, dirty water. This then gets put out into the world. It's not filtered, it's not cleaned, it's not treated in any way, it's just put right back out. This water goes untreated and released directly into the Kayentang River. And just 50 meters down from where this factory is are homes. This river is where people have their source of water, and that's polluted and contaminated from these factories. It's not only the carbon emission, the dye-polluted water, the full garments that are discarded every year and every day by people, but it's other ways that our water is polluted and then given back to us. Like with the water in the Kayentang River, there are other ways that we pollute our water through the fashion industry. There are tiny plastic microfibers that go into the clothing that we wear that we don't see. These microfibers are discarded if they aren't used and go directly into our water source.
Editing Christina back again. The way I explained that is wrong. The tiny microfibers are from the way that the clothing is rinsed. So clothes are rinsed multiple times. Again, that's why all the water from before was polluted. But all of that is rinsed, and then microfibers from the fabric come off, and then that's where the waste comes from.
But what you don't see is that all of these microfibers make up the same equivalent as 50 billion water bottles. Plastic water bottles. That thing that we've all been saying for years you shouldn't use. Get a reusable water bottle. We're doing the same thing in honestly a much higher quantity through fashion. So these microfibers, since they can't be filtered out of our water supply, they get into our water, they get out into the ocean and into the food chain. So basically, through our consumption of fashion and that quickness that we want everything done at, that unsustainable way, we end up hurting ourselves in the process. And that's not to say that we can't do anything about the problem. There are people out there who are trying to come up with solutions. Like in my paper, I discussed these people here, where they are finding solutions to the problems that they see. Like, none of them are perfect, the same way that you and I aren't perfect. Everyone is going to fall back into it accidentally. But even still, there are little things that every person can do to help the industry. One of the bigger things is just to cut out fast fashion altogether. Stop shopping at Forever 21. Make that change. Stop supporting those brands so then they can't function without making a change for themselves to better our planet. You can, rather than just throwing your clothes out like a lot of people do, there are donation centers and ways to recycle fabric. There's a lot of brands where if you have an old pair of jeans and you're not going to wear them anymore, like there's a hole in the knee, you can bring them back to stores, and from there they will recycle them in the proper way. One of the easier things that even I've been able to do is by thrifting clothing, going to stores like Goodwill or Savers and buying what was someone else's rather than going out and buying a completely new thing. And then the last thing, pretty obvious, just buy less clothes. I don't need 10 new shirts for every season. I don't need an entire new wardrobe every time I go on vacation, though I might really want that. It's not necessary, and you're only hurting yourself and the world around you by doing it. Alright, thanks so much for watching. Bye!